horse drifted alarmingly in the betting was, fancied in the morning, continued to drift. It was late on the exchanges to lose. It was something you'd see in a Dick Francis novel, Charles Buttons.
The ground is soft. It's not.
It's heavy.
It's soft on times.
It's heavy.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Barstewers Inquiry. It's Sunday sermon time. We might be out of form on Fridays, but we're back in form for the Sabbath because, as I say, this is the time where we chew the fat for the week. And we've got a special guest for you today as well. So joining myself, John and Chris, it's Matt Chapman.
Hello, lads. It's great to be on board. I think every one of my slightly odd fantasies have come to fruition here because when you said we do this podcast with the cameras off, I realised that you three do just sit there naked and do it. And that is exactly how it works. Yeah. But that's, I think, what everyone feels. You're just slumped in a chair, naked, sat back, and that is why the cameras are off.
You got it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Absolutely. You couldn't have nailed that anymore. And that's the beauty of audio podcasts as well, because when you've got a face for radio, that's what you have to do. Coming on to...
Oiled up at this end of
Unfortunately, you've left yours on. Fucking hell.
Yeah, well, that's just a personal thing, Matt. I just like it.
Hard to know which fits the stomach.
On to the review for this week. And of course, we've had the Punchestown Festival. Are all festivals shit these days? I don't know. We'll come onto that in a bit. But Punchestown started proceedings this week with its fair, can we say, some rather poor rides and upsets this week, Matt. Coming to a couple of them. Paul Townend, for example, two high-profile names beat this week on Galloping des Champs and Gaelic Warrior. What was your view on the rides given by Paul Townend on those two?
I mean, I thought he was desperate on Galloping des Champs, and I thought he was fairly desperate on Gaelic Warrior. You have to put this into perspective. Townend, in general, has been absolutely outstanding as a stable rider. And I do personally believe he is right up there, but I thought he was very average on Galloping des Champs. The one thing we've learned about Galloping des Champs is that he stayed 5 miles, not just 3. When he got beat earlier in the campaign over a shorter trip, that trip was just too short. But I don't think Punchestown is too short. I thought it was a lazy ride. It was the ride of a jockey who thought, all I've got to do is get this thing round. If you looked at the clock as they were going round, they were going 24 mile an hour for quite a bit of that race, which is just crawling round and you're on an out-and-out stayer. That was the time to get your whip out, give the horse one, crack on, chase conflated, and take it to the rest. So the thing about this game is, if you want to be brilliant and described as a hero one day, you have to be described as rubbish the next. That's the nature of every job you do. It's the nature of my job at writing.
Yeah, you're rubbish, that's why.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting for that to come. That didn't take long, did it? The 1.01's coming already.
I get it ready.
Yeah.
I've only been able to get 20p each way, but it's in.
I tried to get on with your firm this morning, that's why, yeah. But anyway, go on.
Maybe Paul Townend couldn't care less whether he gets any praise, but life is about, for most people, trying to achieve things, be good at things.
Yep.
But if you're going to be good, you've got to be bad occasionally. And for me, he was terrible on those two horses.
That's a fair point. I agree with that. Every word of that.
But that's interesting, right? Because obviously it's different coming on here and saying it, but would you have said that on ITV?
So the difference here is...
No one's listening here.
Let's get straight into that kind of conversation. So on this podcast, it's become very obvious over the weeks that, as with most people, and I am amongst them, everyone thinks Lydia is amazing at interviewing, etc. But let me ask a question to you guys. How many of the very best interviews you've ever heard have been 30 seconds to a minute long?
Yep.
Pretty much, I would imagine, none. The best interviews need time.
Yep.
And the simple truth is, on ITV, you don't have time to interview people. After a minute max, you have someone in your ear saying, we've had enough of this, we're moving on. It's no criticism, it's just the nature of terrestrial TV. Now, when you're on racing channels, particularly racing TV, now Sky Sports Racing has gone down the route of showing anything that moves any minute. Yeah. There actually isn't much time to talk on Sky Sports Racing either anymore. And as everyone will know, all the chat shows have been done away with. But on racing TV, you get time, which is why Luck on Sunday and why Lydia come across as so good. And when I don't mean that chippily in any way. They are, for me, the best out there, Lydia and Nick, at what they do.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, as a presenter,
Context. Yeah.
you need time.
Yep.
I don't buy into the Lydia idolatry. I'm a sort of a lone voice here. I mean, I think she's very good, but I don't think she's exceptional, as everybody seems to think. But I take the point, exactly.
Coming back to the two horses we mentioned, Galloping Deschamps and Gaelic Warrior, I did feel that Willie Mullins, after Galloping Deschamps, was probably a little bit more upset with the ride than what he let on. You could tell there was cracks because he said, well, Paul decided to sit where he sat. And you could see in that moment when he said that, he wasn't that happy with that decision to do that. But then he sort of covered it up by saying, well, maybe Galloping couldn't have gone any faster. But as you pointed out, Matt, for stages in that race, they were clocking very moderate fractions. And if Galloping Deschamps can't run faster than that, then he wouldn't have won the races that he has, especially over shorter trips as well, despite, like you say, he could run for 4 or 5 miles. The other one, Gaelic Warrior, I felt on the ground because it was riding yielding at that point at Punchestown. That's what found him out in the end, the sort of moderate pace. He was happy to take a lead again, and he's shown his best at this trip anyway, when the ground's been very testing. He's won over 3 miles, so that tells you that he again stays really well. So Paul maybe got caught napping a bit there.
For me, that horse just needs absolute aggression. We've had this conversation with John Bon, haven't we, all season, that everyone's been saying, give it a McCoy, effectively. And Nico de Boinville, who for so many years has been ditched by JP McManus and ignored, suddenly produced what all of us have been wanting on John Bon. And for me, when you're on a horse like Gaelic Warrior, it's very simple, isn't it? You machete him out the start. If the rules allow, which they do in Ireland, you give him as many as you can on the way round and get him as far clear and jumping for fun. I mean, that's what he is. But he popped out, second place, pootling along, and then he just got done for speed at the end by a jockey who is seizing every single opportunity. And for that, he's a team player, Danny Mullins. I bet he loved picking up Townend in the last half furlong in that. I bet he went home and he wet himself over it. It was fantastic for him.
I think Danny Mullins has found a stone since Paddy Mullins gave him a coating earlier on this season when pair met and he said, you don't come up my inside. I thought, ooh. I think Danny Mullins certainly had a point to prove, and I was impressed with the foot it showed, but Paul Townend's ride for me on Gaelic was rather bizarre.
Who's to say that Patrick Mullins' little argument, or whatever you want to call it, wasn't what Danny Mullins needed? Because hasn't he been riding like a man inspired since that day? I mean, I'm not saying he's not been a good jockey. Maybe that rocket was what Danny needed in some ways.
Yeah, sometimes jockeys actually do kick on from something like that. I mean, it's like going back to the old days at school. Obviously, now we live in different times where kids are modelly coddled. But, you know, back in the day, sometimes you get some kids that just needed to kick up the arse and they absolutely thrive. Come on, get your arse in gear.
Why our wet rules are so pants.
To me, this is where I think Danny Mullins needs full credit for that ride because I thought it was excellent. And fair play. Anything else at Punchestown this week that caught your eye or didn't, Matt?
I think the best hurdler in Ireland is Lossiemouth. And I would have Lossiemouth over State Man, particularly at Cheltenham. Maybe not at Leopardstown. I'd have Lossiemouth over State Man all of next season. The only thing for me stopping Lossiemouth winning the champion hurdle is either the mare's hurdle, which hopefully will have been blasted into obliteration by then, if the people at Cheltenham do their thing when they reorganise the Cheltenham Festival and actually make it a decent 4 days. Constitution Hill being the monster that he once was, but I would have no doubt Lossiemouth would beat State Man in a champion hurdle.
John, you like the mare, don't you, Lossiemouth? You're a fan.
Yeah, I'd chuck in with that, to be honest. I think State Man doesn't really seem to be quite on song at Cheltenham somehow. I thought he had harder work at that champion hurdle than he might have done. So, yeah, I'd be full square behind Lossiemouth in the champion hurdle.
Be interesting next season, of course, whether they duck that and go the old Quivega route, the yawn route, which is the problem with the Fez these days. And, of course, that's a problem with the national season where you target one particular meeting all year where it kind of affects the rest of the calendar. Everyone builds towards that, and the behemoth that is the Cheltenham Festival needs to come down a peg or two, I believe. Anyway, moving on to Saturday, where we had the first of our classics, and long faces here at Bar Stewards, of course, because we were saying all last year and this year that City of Troy could have won the World Snooker, could have won the boat race, could have done anything. Walks on water. We were all left open-jawed, John.
Yeah, he's lucky if he's going to get a walk on part in Corrie after that, isn't he, I'm afraid. But it was just hugely anticlimactic, wasn't it? You know?
The thing is, I was busting for a champion. I looked at the Guineas winners in recent times, since Frankel. I'm not cribbing them, because obviously they're all Group 1 horses. I'm not saying that at all, but they're a bit... they get beat.
Having said that, I think yesterday's winner was bloody impressive.
Yes, absolutely.
He'd probably beat the right runner-up if you assume City of Troy's just run no sort of race whatsoever. I think Rosallion coming second after coming there swinging 2.5 out, holding up that French form and the Ascot form from his 2-year-old career. The Godolphin horse to run all over that.
Yeah.
On turf debut, I think that's pretty exciting, right?
It is. I can't crab the winner at all. The second for me is going to be a July Cup horse. If they want to go the mile, then it's the Breeders' Cup Mile at Delmar rather than anything that's remotely stiff. Do you agree with that, John? Doesn't get a mile, Rosallion?
I wouldn't rule out them going to the Curragh, to be honest. I think then they might decide to drop back.
Yeah, unless there was a huge tailwind, which can be at the Curragh, I'd be against Rosallion at the Curragh. That horse has got gears, serious gears, and you can see why the Hannon lot are excited about it. For me, not at the top level on a stiffish track over a mile, no chance.
The only proviso I put into that is that I'd be pretty certain he'll end up in the St James's Palace Stakes now against Notable Speech. And incidentally, when you talk about Delmar, he's not going to be Notable Speech at Delmar, and I'd be pretty certain Notable Speech will end up at Delmar. I mean, that would be the obvious place for him, but they always say round the bend is less taxing than the straight mile. Maybe in a St James's Palace where you can get a breather around the bend and then kick in the straight, it might be easier for him.
Possibly, if it turned up rattling quick, nice quick ground, then yeah, I see that point, Matt. It's not the most taxing mile, is the round course there over the mile. So yeah, I do see that point of view, but I think he'd be better over a strongly run 6 where like the July Cup, he'd come blitzing through him and just absolutely blowing.
We're gagging for a sprinter. So many times do we get a Group 1 5 furlong or 6 furlong sprint, and we all kind of just look at it and think, well, any one of about 15 could win that because there is no outstanding sprinter. So if they now said, okay, well, we'll go Commonwealth Cup and then July Cup, etc., there is an opening there, isn't there?
Yeah, if I owned it, that's what I'd do. But as we know, that if you're trying to make a sire out of something, ideally you probably want to be a miler, win a Group 1 over a mile, maybe for more value as a sire, I would say. John, coming to the rest of the form of the race, the one thing that worries me about the race is the fact, and I'm not downplaying the race at all, but the third horse, Hartem, does that bring the form down?
No, I think he's in pro for the male.
Okay. No, that's good. I love different opinions. I always just felt that he is a sort of slightly lesser than Chindit, if you know what I mean.
Well, he kept him going a lot last year, didn't he? You know, and
didn't miss a dance or a buffet.
Exactly. And I think just with that Craven, probably the tempo of a mile race just suits him a bit better. It hasn't all been so much crash bang wallop for him, and I thought he ran good yesterday. He was coming away from others.
Well, it is my hope that the Guineas form holds up. I'm not being sexist here, well I am. I always like the Colts to do well because I just think that's where the strength is. In recent times, the 3-year-old fillies seem to hold the edge over the Colts in terms of quality, and I always prefer a good, strong 3-year-old colt throughout a season to stamp its class on everything and win race after race. Like, that's what I can remember like that was Kingman. And I managed to get that beat in the Guineas. He thumped Night of Thunder in the Greenham, and then I had my bollocks on in Guineas, and then it plays with your head, this game. But
it does. Just on the training of these horses, I have nothing to do with horses yet. Like, I've not got any background in horses. I've got nothing at all. But I've long held the opinion that racing people are completely stuck in a tradition which doesn't move much with the times other than on a scientific basis. And just because some trainer's forefather trained a horse in a certain way, everyone has to do it. We've got a Guineas winner who's had 3 runs this year. Now, I didn't fancy Notable Speech from the point of view of betting because I don't like backing horses that have only run on the artificial and they're on grass. For me, it's just total guesswork. You might be right, you might be wrong. But obviously Notable Speech did. But he's had 3 runs this year. Obviously, Guineas have been won by horses first time out. But if someone went to the Champion Hurdle or the Cheltenham Gold Cup or what Martin Pike did with Cyborgo back in the day in the Stairs Hurdle, win it first time out, we'd all be going, what the hell is he doing? Like, why is he trying to win a race like that first time out? This is the most stupid thing anyone could try and do. Like, obviously, he's going to have a fitness problem. Surely Notable Speech tells everyone that fitness is such a key. Like City of Troy and Rosalien, I think trainers get stuck because in the back of their mind, they're thinking, okay, if we run it in a trial, it gets beat, the dream is over. We've already got a top class horse, so we have to run it first time in the Guineas so the dream doesn't end. But then you're trying to run against horses that are piping fit. And it just seems to me that if all Guineas horses had 2 or 3 runs, the puzzle would be much more interesting for all of us. I just think trainers look at it the wrong way. The winner of the Guineas was on his 4th outing of the year, and the others wonder why he's a bit fitter. Maybe he's just better. Time will tell. We'll know that at the end of the year.
Yeah, there was a trend started when Henrietta Knight and Best Mate treated with cotton wool sort of thing. So other trainers thought, well, it's won 3 Gold Cups. That must be the way to do it. Just have 3 or 4 runs. Don't over-race them. John Bomb, for example, doesn't miss a dance. I know horses are different. Some probably are more fragile. Some probably need more time between the runs. I get it. But as a rule, like what you're saying, Matt, I think it's correct. People watch someone else do it and go, well, that's won 3 Gold Cups. So he only has like 2 or 3 runs. Is that the difference? Desert Orchid would turn up every 2 weeks through a national season. It's kind of trends. People follow what works. And I think that's where trainers might get stuck rather than the individual horse. Some horses can take a lot of racing. Like, punish me harder, Daddy.
You've said that before, haven't you?
The visions
in a big nappy.
Oh, yeah. There would have to be a big nappy frame. Be a fucking massive nappy.
These are the horses that need like 90 days off because they're old and frail like me, so they need to be kept fresh. Matt, I've heard about your tennis.
Oh,
With Weaver.
no.
Can you back up day after day of playing tennis, or do you need a couple of days?
Fatty, because to be honest, Weaver's not fat anymore. He's lost a whole load of weight. He bulges from time to time, but he's pretty fit these days. There's a feature in the Racing Post this Sunday about Jason. And when I was a reporter on the Racing Post a long, long time ago when Jason was riding, I took him to Mauritius for a Jockey's Challenge one year, which I was organising. So we got to know each other, and I remember I would sit on his floor in Newmarket in the bath, and this is obviously conjuring up all the wrong images, and he'd be in the bath like dying, and we'd just chat about racing and stuff like this. But the thing about Jason is he is absolutely hardcore competitive with whatever he does. It doesn't matter what, everything is a competition. So I can play tennis a bit, I think, but I'm not going to run for pathetic little drop shots and all that shit. Jason loves doing that to someone he knows is less fit than him. So you're in the middle of what you think is quite a good rally, and then he does one of those little dippers straight over the net, and he knows I'm not going to move. It's just a horrible, horrible experience with this little rat running around at the back of the court as if it's the most important game that's ever happened in the history. And then at the end, he does his little chippy thing of, well, I thought you played well, having been beaten 6-love, 6-love.
Terrible.
That's a very long-winded way of saying he's got your game sussed and he hands your ass to you.
Well, it's a long way of saying I'm probably just shit.
Did Weaver used to box?
I mean, he certainly looks as though he did.
I'm sure he's quite handy as a boxer.
Yeah. He's hardcore, Jason. It's funny because we all look at jockeys and some we probably think are either more manly or womanly than another. But underneath it all, there aren't many of them that are rock hard. James Doyle, for instance, always comes across as the most polite, sort of mouth in the mouth. Not so long ago at Newbury, I could see on his face, like I thought, what's wrong with you? So I said, are you right, Doyle? Honestly, I thought he was going to smash my face in.
He'll have bet it, mate. He'll have bet it.
And about 2 weeks later, I said, what was wrong that day? He said, that horse, I thought he'd win. And he just ran terrible. Underneath it all, most of them are rock hard. You can't really do the game if you're not.
Well, bringing on to that, Kevin Blake put something up on Twitter about Jack Kennedy's injury list. It's astonishing. Go to Kevin Blake's Twitter page to see it. The injury list of Jack Kennedy over time. He must have broke nearly every bone in his body. It's ridiculous. These guys are incredibly tough.
There is a slight theory there for me. Jack must have been riding, 16, 17? I mean, very young he started. And for me, he suffered in exactly the same way that Brian Cooper did. When he started, he was the young sensation, come through the Desi Hughes ranks. Everyone thought Brian Cooper was going to be the next great jockey. And he just got smashed up every season. I went over and did a feature with him when he had his huge leg injury, and it was just frightening. He couldn't move or do anything. And I do wonder with the jumps jockeys, if you're breaking your bones consistently, age 16, 17, 18, when your body hasn't developed, like these aren't fully grown men or whatever, then it can cost you later. And let's hope Jack's in a clear run now. But I do worry that his bones have been weakened at a younger age. Everyone who knows anything about jumps racing in Ireland who you speak to just says that this lad is absolutely mustard.
Moving on to the last bit of the review, which of course was stateside at Churchill Downs, and it was the Run for the Roses, the Kentucky Derby, where Mystic Dan managed to prevail in a very tight finish from Sierra Leone and Forever Young. I had the privilege of watching the race back several times just to see if I could see anything, and I can safely say we're not going to get a Triple Crown winner. Mystic Dan had a real paint-stripping kind of trip, saved every inch. Not the best horse in the race, but it's managed to do it. The best chance will probably be the Preakness, but it won't get a mile and a half, I don't think. Magnier John must be absolutely seething after his Saturday, with Sierra Leone failing to get up in the closing stages, beating a nose, of course, at Churchill Downs there, and then with the City of Troy not running its race. What's the mood in the Magnier house like, John?
It won't be the best, will it? Let's hope Yalang runs some sort of race today, otherwise the gloom will deepen, I would have thought.
There's no images of him standing up there and with full regalia on display when one quickens up, wins by 3 or 4. Poor old John and Culmore not having the best of time yesterday. Chappers, did you see the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, I thought Mystic Dan, I think it was a classic case of a horse putting a race to bed, but then being absolutely knackered in the last few strides. Sierra Leone was interesting. Tyler Gaffleone riding for Chad Brown. He doesn't ride all of Chad's horses, but he has had plenty of big race success for Chad. But I was kind of a little bit surprised that the Coolmore clan didn't stick to Tory on that, because, of course, Tory has ridden loads of big races for Coolmore over the years. Coolmore were desperate to win their first Kentucky Derby. They know that Dettori is absolutely desperate to win the Kentucky Derby. They're not petty like we are over here. They take jockeys on and off as if it doesn't mean anything. So I'm slightly surprised, as a man who's ridden loads of Group 1 winners for them, they didn't stick to Tory on it, to be quite honest, because they kind of like making stories, don't they? And you just wonder what might have been if Dettori had been in one of his I can't be defeated moods, which he has from time to time.
I've got to agree, because the Jap on the third one, he outrode Tyler. I felt when they were riding for position around the last bend, I'm going to secure first run on you, and that sort of didn't help Sierra Leone. For strides, Tyler had to then just sit and wait, and I think that's what cost him in the end. I think if he could have got rolling sooner, the result would have been different, and the Tory may have well been the difference.
Wasn't it lovely, though, to see a crowd, the pathetic crowd we'll have had at the Guineas, 150,000 people there. The NBC coverage, as always, is outstanding. And American racing is in just as much trouble, shit, whatever you want to call it, as our racing. But you really get the feeling at the end of that race that was something special for the nation. I don't know whether it was something special or not. And obviously, America is a much bigger country, so you'd expect more people. But seeing 150,000 people at a horse race is something quite special when you look at the stands.
Yeah, this sort of brings on to the second part of the show, really. This is where we get nitty-gritty and then some funnies at the end. Right? The nitty-gritty stuff for me is British racing, obviously, is not embracing betting. And I'm not saying that's totally British racing's fault, although they could have done more. But the direction of travel is certainly one of which betting is not really promoted anymore. In wider society, it's kind of getting frowned upon because the word's sullied, and using words like safer gambling and tools for deposit limits and things like that. And of course, this brings us on to the recent announcements that have taken place this week regarding interim measures regarding affordability checks, which the BGC have trumpeted and have come out with reasonable affordability limit. If you view it as such, you are getting, I believe, £5,000 in a month, £25,000 over a year, net deposits. What's not to like? It all looks quite swimmingly good. Even for a full-timer like me that might even fall foul of some of this, because obviously I play in larger limits. I'm not being selfish here. I want the game to flourish. However, this is the problem. There are two things here that is confusing me, Matt. Andrew Rhodes, chair of the Gambling Commission, he did an interview with The Guardian and stated from August, these checks will be at £125 in a month. So there's two different hymn sheets here. One group saying one thing, one group saying another. And obviously you run Yeehaw Bet. The problem is here that the AML guidelines are still absolutely non-existent. So you guys obviously have to protect your organisations from massive fines from the Gambling Commission because you've got to do your homework on AML. These limits that the BGC are trumpeting and the BHA are all like, ooh, aren't we good, are suddenly useless because if you have to do AML checks, then it doesn't really matter. The punter's really reluctant to provide the level of information required, as we've seen. What's going to happen here?
It's a hard topic to know where to start. So let's start with the basics. Nothing that has been suggested by anyone, whether that be £125, £5,000, £25,000, none of that is going to help, stop, prevent problem gambling.
Correct.
So first of all, it's all completely irrelevant with what it is trying to achieve. When you look at it like that, it's hard to know where to go next. I think the 125 will be the kind of checks that have always gone on when you open a betting account and you wouldn't even know they'd happen. So I don't think they are going to affect punters particularly. But the problem is when you split punters who bet and are just having a bit of fun, which is absolutely fine, they won't be affected by probably any of this. My own mum, she bets £5 a day, £10 a day. She's not even going to know that there's ever been any discussion over this kind of thing. But then you have to divide it with the punters that fund the game, because as we know, this game is funded by losing. And those punters are caught up with what we're being told are the problem gambling group, which is the top 2.8%. And there you have your problem. We are already seeing quite clearly mathematically that this does not work, because the casino players, that is going up at the moment. People are losing more money on casino than ever before. Now, that all makes sense because the sports product, the margins are so tight that bookmakers aren't going to promote the sports side of things because they're already being crushed. Like, people think, why don't you promote the sports? Well, if you're a business and you can't make it pay, you don't promote it, do you? I mean, it's fairly obvious. It's not rocket science, this. Much that we would like that. So then you've got into the mix of the funding of the sport. And of course, as far as the casino players, people might say, well, hold on, why is the casino going up? Well, most casino players don't know anything about affordability checks. So the racing punter is, I would imagine now, pretty well educated on affordability checks. The serious punter knows what's going to hit them if they do certain things. The casino punter is not up on this at all, doesn't know what's going on. So the sports betting punter knows that once he or she has run out of UK firms, they tootle off to the black market. So the sports punter is not going black market quicker, and the turnover is dipping, therefore, on the sports punter. The casino punter is just working through the firms gradually. You've got a whole load of mayhem. None of that's really cleared up anything other than the fact that it's just all nonsense, because it doesn't really understand the human beings and addiction. And I mean that seriously. Most of us are all flawed in some ways. Most of us at some point in our lives will do things that we shouldn't do. That includes some people who end up being addicted to certain things, lots of different things, almost everything in life you can become addicted to. But you're not addicted to gambling if you have an addiction. You are an addicted person. You only have to listen to Kieran Schumacher when he talks about his addictions. He still has addictions, but he's not using any drink and he's not using any substances. But his addictions include things now like going and swimming in cold rivers in 6 a.m. in the morning and things like that. He's just transferred his addiction to something else. So we're not even dealing with people who are addicted to gambling. You're dealing with people who have addictions. And once you're into that, again, all this just goes away. This harks right back to the start when the BHA, Greg Swift and his cronies were fast asleep when all this was going on. Because you can't speak to the BHA and question them, you cannot get any answers on any of this. But as far as I can see, no one did anything. Then they joined the bandwagon of we're going to speak to MPs, big deal, or we're going to print articles in the Racing Post, big deal. Now, don't get me wrong, all of that probably was beneficial to a certain extent. The fans and the punters who have spoken and addressed and written in and done all that stuff have had some sort of effect. But what we needed was a leadership straight away coming up with other ideas. I would like to know, what have we presented to government other than affordability checks? Give us an idea. Well, at the moment, the industry's agreed voluntary levy gifts of 0.1% of gross gambling yield. That's the contribution at the moment. Like, did the BHA contact all the bookmakers and say, look, the worst thing on earth for anyone is affordability checks? Can we go to the government and say, we'd like to create 0.2% or 0.3% or 0.5% or 1% or 50% or whatever it is? Obviously, I'm getting extreme now for effect. But did we offer them alternative and say to them, look, gambling's nothing to do with these addictions, but we'd like to chuck as much money as we can on addiction research and put as much into this as we can, rather than you destroying horse racing by doing something that's going to make no difference. And indeed, were punters asked anything? Barry Hearn was on ITV the other week, which you covered, about a betting tax. Now, I would very much doubt that will ever happen. But if someone had said to me, would you be okay if 1p out of every pound you spent betting went towards gambling addiction, I would take that every day of my life over any form of affordability check. And I would hazard a guess that most punters would do so as well. My thing with all of this is, what have we actually offered instead of these ridiculous checks? And as from where we go from here, well, obviously we need a completely different type of funding for the sport.
John, Chris, I'm going to bring you two in here regarding this. We've touched on this topic many a time, and we've said sort of 3 years ago that single customer view, if you like, or affordability checks or documentation is not a way to tackle this problem, in the fact that addiction is a behavioural problem where bookmakers, I'm pretty sure, given the algorithms they've got at spotting winners and knowing winning shrewd accounts that are beating prices, have also got ways of knowing when someone's betting irregularly, as in all of a sudden a said user logs in at 2 a.m, plays the slots, plays on Chinese ping pong to get his money back, then a bit of blackjack, and then ends up doing £5,000 in. Now, you know that's not correct behaviour. So why are we here?
Well, I think one of the reasons we're here is because racing is not comfortable in its own skin and doesn't have people defending it to the hilt.
Yeah, there's a poverty of leadership, isn't there? That's the problem which Matt referred to. There's been a lack of strategy. There's been a lack of a proper response at the right time. The ship had sailed almost 18 months ago, and look, people writing to the newspapers and MPs, will have had some effect. But the antis and the proponents of affordability were allowed to occupy the reasonable middle ground in the eyes of the general public by appearing on television unchallenged for years and years and years. How many times have you seen in the last 18 months an anti-gambling advocate being opposed by somebody in favour of it? They're always unopposed, and that's the problem.
I think, Chris, you made a really good anecdote where you said about the barbecue where...
Yeah, it's actually Jordan Peterson. I can't remember one of his books. It's the vegan barbecue. So you got 10 mates, right, which I haven't got, but assume I have 10 mates. And all of them want to come to a barbecue.
That's right there, isn't it?
No, it's ridiculous, and that's where it falls over. And you need to say to them, look, going to have a barbecue at my house, love to see you all. And someone writes back and says, oh, I'd love to go, but I'm a vegan, so I couldn't possibly eat anything that's got meat on it on your barbecue grill. So you go back to your other 9 mates and say, look, we all want to see him. He actually only wants to eat vegan food. Are you happy with a meat-free alternative? And most people will say, yeah, go on, fuck it. It's more important to have a good time and meet your friends and worry about political dogma or ideology. So in that way, someone holding a minority view has been able to influence the majority, because most people are like, well, I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. It's not that big a deal. Go on then. Most people are reasonable. And that's how minority groups can disproportionately affect the behaviour of the majority by being that squeaky wheel that gets most grease. So that's how I think it's been allowed to happen. Because the bottom line is this: if you are anti-prohibition of gambling, the argument's been framed in such a way as that you must be pro-gambling harm. Now, nobody's going to say, well, I'm in favour of people wrecking their lives through gambling. So they've carefully manipulated that argument so that they occupy the middle space, where we know that they're extremists, a lot of these people. And that's the problem, I think.
The real problem with all this is it's just not going to help the problem.
No.
And it seems incredible that with people from the NHS being quoted as saying the people who spend 25 grand or whatever aren't the people that we've got issues with. The problem gamblers are the 50 quid, the 100 quid. There's just no understanding of the issue. The fact is, you can be a problem gambler gambling away £1 million, and you can be a problem gambler gambling away 10 quid. If 10 quid is all you have to pay for food for that week and you spend it gambling, you are a problem gambler because you're using your food money to gamble. The amount is just not relevant. The reason why that person has become a gambler is the problem, and that involves effectively, in most cases, family or those closest to the people realizing and connecting with those people and understanding that their offspring or their relation has an issue and getting to the bottom of it. Again, it's down to being a human being. Humans do desperately horrible things every day of the week, which all of us think, how the hell has someone gone and done that today? Like, what has gone on in their head? But that is just about being human. Now, obviously, with things like addictions, the human race, because we're people who don't like to see people suffer in the main, do all we can to help. And if piling money into gambling-related organisations is the way to help, then why is racing not doing that if that is seen as the solution? The first thing to do that everyone should have done is separate an industry like horse racing away from casino. You're talking about two totally different things. And I know there are some problem gamblers who bet on horse racing. Of course, there's going to be a relative lap over on occasions. But in the main, most people would understand that the industry of horse racing, or indeed greyhound racing, is different to the industry of slot machines and casinos. That should have been the first thing. And if they couldn't do anything, then they should not be in power. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely spot on. And obviously we've been big critics of the BHA, much to our legal detriment in the past also. The
BHA think I absolutely loathe all of them. There are people at the BHA that I hold in the highest regard. But when you refuse to answer questions, I'm still waiting to speak to the BHA about the new whip rules, which have now probably been in place, 2 years, a year and a half? I can't remember, they've changed so many times. But I still don't know all the ins and outs of why they came in. I would like to question someone over those. There are so many things. I still would like to know about the survey that Julie Harrington quoted when I think she was in Australia, and she reeled out statistics from a survey that no one has ever seen. I have asked probably 30 times to see the survey. They refused to send the survey for me. The gut feeling is this survey never ever existed, and yet our leader was quoting from it. When you have people in power who won't answer questions from the likes of me, and these people should be able to run rings round me. Now, I speak to Martin Crudis, who effectively is a boss of mine, but he will let you ask him anything you want. When I speak to Martin Crudis, I know I will not win. He is just too on the money, too clever. You will not win an argument with Martin Crudis. He's got every fact and figure, and by the end of it, you don't really know where to come at him next, because he's just got answers for everything. That is how the BHA should be with the likes of me, Lydia, Nick Lark, and anyone else. And I don't mean to put myself in that bracket, it sounds a bit big-headed. They should be able to run rings round me, but they won't even let me talk to them. Like, what are they afraid of?
The thing is, their projects, for example, Premierisation, coming onto this Cairnbet are a northern bookmaker, and really interesting to read this. They do some great blogs about the takings on course, things like that. And Cairnbet have come out and said they were at Hexham the other day and they were taking 25 bets a race because the time slot had moved for Hexham and they had to move their times and it affected their business. The BHA aren't interested, like you said, Matt, in listening to these people. Real life evidence affects their business, their livelihood, their staff. It has a knock-on effect in economies. Looking at Betfair's turnover on the Guineas on Saturday, the turnover is now 50% lower than 2011. So I'm loving the BHA anticipating the levy returns, what they're expecting, because all the BHA seem to be wishing for is a bigger slice of fuck all.
Yeah.
It's crazy. They're absolute mental bends. The big bucks have got it sewn up. That's why they're making people go Sunday racing, because they want racing wall to wall, like ground racing. They want 10 o'clock at Enloe till 9:28 at Doncaster, Stainforth, like in the ground world. And they want the exact same for horse racing, where racing will start at 10:30 a.m. and finish at 9 p.m. at night, wall to wall throughout the year.
But with the affordability checks, I'm amazed that there hasn't been some form of discussion about how to get the information to bookmakers other than from the customer. Most of us have a bank account. It should be possible for you communication from either your bank or your financial advisor or your accountant. That should be enough. If a bookmaker gets a letter from your financial advisor that says, I look after the accounts for this person, I know their financial situation, and I'm absolutely happy that they are perfectly able to gamble a figure a year or whatever it is.
At the end of the day, though, Matt, you shouldn't even be having the question asked anyway. I mean, I can spend money on loads of things that do me harm, and nobody's asking whether I can afford it or not.
No, and you're absolutely right. But on the basis that something is going to happen, we're all a bit stuck. I'm just trying to think of ways around.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the problem. I mean, there's nobody with the backbone to actually stand up and call it out properly.
Well, the big problem also is that it's going to go on forever, because we all know Labour are about to become the government, not because Labour have created anything amazing, but just because everyone hates the Conservatives, which is absolutely fine. But maybe Labour will be more sympathetic to Conservatives. Who knows? But, I mean, they're not going to be bothered about this, are they? You would hope important things to worry about than the 0.1% of people who are in difficulty over me having a fiver on the Grand National. Jesus. It's mind-blowing, it really is, how we have got ourselves into this situation over this kind of thing. And you're absolutely right. We all know it. Everyone's said it. We can all go down the road and buy 1,000 bottles of wine and drink it all this afternoon, or go and buy 6,000 cigarettes and smoke those all day and night. But if you want to have a reasonable bet for some people, then all hell breaks loose.
Matt, it's just interesting to have like wishing yourself on the show, regardless of the untouchables in terms of who don't go on there. That's a career-ending move.
This kind of podcast is just what we were talking about with Paul Townend. I fully expect I'll say something at Chester on ITV next week, and you'll say what a wanker Chapman is next Sunday.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
Yes!
But that's absolutely fine. On Twitter and stuff like that, none of that matters, because for me, if you're not annoying people, that's just as important as people liking you, because at least you're saying something that's making their mind tick. I've blocked people on Twitter before. You're not going to like this for this podcast, but the only times I block people on Twitter is when they continually swear left, right, and centre, which is fine on a little podcast like this. But on Twitter, I don't think it's a good thing to be continually using the C and the F word every other sentence. Like, it just becomes a bit boring.
Yeah, bollocks to that.
We've totally fucking cut it down. Right.
Bunch of sauces.
Coming on to John's point. John, I'm intrigued here. Oliver Burridge-Dean, saving racing single-handed. What's this, John?
It's the 26 club that was highlighted earlier in the week on the telly. Cambridge University, and they're getting all the students there, and they were all in the bar, and there's hardly a chin in sight. And you can tell Oliver's obviously getting access because he's from a terribly good family, don't you know?
Double barrel name is there.
Yeah.
Starting point, isn't it? And he's well on his way to getting kicked out of Sandhurst. And
the priesthood.
these take initiatives, they bring them in, they're never quantifiable. Nobody ever actually gets any results as how many people they actually bring into racing, but they still get all the publicity. And I just can't imagine many working class kids from down the neck of the woods where I live getting much of a leg up into racing the way these people are.
I've not seen this at all, so I was intrigued.
I did see that. I saw their interview on ITV, a couple of people from the 26 Club, and I did think it was unfortunate that one of the people getting into the racecourse for a tenner was then a girl who had a horse run last week and started advertising the horses she had at home. It's kind of, I didn't feel that was what that was really about.
Missing the point, yeah.
Yeah. I've been at Doncaster and Chepstow during the last jump season, and they had student days there. I have to say, it was probably the best atmosphere I've had on a racetrack outside of Cheltenham and sort of Aintree, etc. It really brought the place alive, and they weren't all posh kids or whatever. Some of them clearly were there to some of the dance music, some of them were clearly there to have a few drinks, but it was 5 deep round the paddock, and let's face it, not all people who go to Cambridge and Oxford are necessarily posh for a start. But I know what you're saying.
But they'll tell you within 5 minutes of meeting them, in my experience.
Yeah.
You'll know.
The impression is that that is what it is, and I completely understand that, and that will be the impression people have watching at home. But I do feel that those student days, there is a chance that some of those people will come back. So it's not quite as bad, I think, as it seems.
King and Queen made patrons in Jockey Club.
Hooray!
Our struggle, John.
God bless them all.
Now, I'm just wondering if this finally answers the question. Does background actually help in racing?
No, of course it doesn't. It's a meritocracy.
So you're not in favour of sausage fingers being made a patron then, John?
It is what it is, isn't it? We're still in the backwash of Queen Elizabeth being all things racing, aren't we?
What did you make of the old horses running through London? They'd obviously had enough and all, haven't they?
Even another sign of the government cuts, isn't it? The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse have been laid off
Bolted,
and the horses remain.
Horses bolted, indeed. Coming on to some questions from you very selves. Good one here. Chris Pull, the chief trumpeter.
Yeah.
Top 3 horse racing narcissists, past or present.
Wow.
Come on.
We've got 3 of the 4 here, haven't we? So, I mean...
What do you mean 3?
Yeah,
we've got all 4.
Yeah, quite, yeah.
It's obvious to this day that you can see from the 2 organisations that are dishing punishment to the sport, the Gambling Commission and the BHA.
Yeah.
They will pat themselves on the back for a job well done when they've done absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
That's the BHA. And the Gambling Commission, I've never seen anyone like Andrew John Rhodes slip questions like he does.
Got Sugar Ray Leonard, didn't they?
Answers nothing, just sits there with a straight face. Yes, it's something we need to look into. He never looks into it. That's what he says when he's in a corner. Yeah, yes, it's something we must look into.
Let's have a review, yeah, quite right.
If that's the case, but then never does. These guys are just incredible. They are Group 1 in terms of how to make out that everything's rosy and everything we're doing is correct when they're not. It's incredible. As in, like, pundits. John, do you remember anybody from the past that you've come across that were like, massive narcissist?
I think there's 3 people you can chuck in straight away in racing. Says massive narcissists. We'll start off with Mr. Gosden, master of Clarehaven.
Some good Colombian
He speaks proper though, doesn't he?
Managed to make his daft sabbatical idea responsible entirely for the Tories' resurgence and make out he knows more about man management and hairdryer Fergie. Lester Piggott, who never ever wrote a piece of work to assist with the smooth preparation of a classic contender. And the Michael O'Ryan Airblow.
Oh, yes. That's a great call.
Well, he managed to make us trying to emulate Red Rum and go into the annals of history about what a shit handicapper of steeplechasers he'd been.
I think as well, for the disgrace with Tiger Rock, when they didn't go for the national.
Yeah.
I think that shows you what type of a man he is. It's dreadful, man.
That's not narcissism. Narcissism doesn't exist.
Yeah. Matt, anything from the past from you that...
I mean, James Knight's got to be in there, hasn't he? Or 90?
Oh, he's dreadful. Dreadful. Totally dreadful.
I mean, Calvin's got to be in there. TC absolutely hates me with a venom. I genuinely have no idea why. Usually you have a rough idea why someone dislikes you, but I have no idea why. He used to work on the sports desk at the Racing Post when I was on the news desk on the racing. And he used to hate racing, absolutely hate it. And he'd come over and say, oh, fucking racing desk and all this kind of stuff. Now he seems to be a racing person, but he hates me with a venom. He will just say anything he can to be mean or nasty, which is absolutely fine. But it's just a weird, like, I don't think there's anyone on Twitter who would say that I hate them. Maybe the BHA Twitter feed. But other than that, I don't think there's anyone out there that would say I hate them. I don't really go for people on social media or anything like that. I say what I think, and I try and say as honestly as I can on most things, but it's weird. Calvin genuinely will just go for me whenever. I mean, maybe not these days, but certainly for last year.
Knight, for example, and I know it's mainly me he hates, but takes delight in anything that I ever get wrong or ever say wrong, or someone posts something negative towards me. He'll snidely like it in the comments. He's just pathetic. But he listens. Why listen? But he probably likes John and Chris. But fair play.
No, I don't think so.
On the subject of being a racing person, Matt, do you think you would still be one if the Dancing on Ice thing had gone a bit differently?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So Dancing on Ice, oh boys. I guess ITV Racing is the biggest opportunity I've had. But once you go down the route of a bit of TV or whatever, without doubt, my big opportunity to do something different. No one really knows this, but I would have loved to have hosted quiz shows. Obviously, other people will have a different opinion to this. But I think what I'm quite good at is getting stuff out of people, and I think I do that quite well, and when I'm given the opportunity. And I think I'd have been good on quiz shows.
See you on tipping point for sure.
Yeah, you could do Ben Shepherd.
The Leslie Crowther of our age.
So when at Dancing on Ice, I got that opportunity, and I didn't just get given it. I had to audition. There were a whole load of number of people in it. When I got it, I have to say that day, I did come home and just sit there for about half an hour and think, what the fuck has just happened? Like, oh my God. Dancing on Ice, not everyone knows, but you have a full rehearsal in the afternoon. Everything that happened in the evening exactly had happened in the afternoon. All the producers were completely happy with everything I did. And the show I did was awful, and I was awful on it. So the next morning, I watched it once, and I wrote down all the things that were awful. You have to remember the commentator on Dancing Ice had never been amongst the audience before. This was the first time it had happened. And I realised when I watched it back that it was kind of like watching theatre, but a TV show. It worked when you were in the hall, or at least it felt like you did, because you were getting the feedback from the people who were sat 2 feet away from you, who appeared to be having a great night. But when you watched it back as a TV show, it didn't work. So it was awful. Sent the producers in a whole load of stuff that we could do differently so that the next week it would all work perfectly. Anyway, I heard nothing back. Wednesday came, nothing back. Thursday, got the phone call from my racing bosses saying, Matt, you've got to come into London. It's not good news about Dancing on Ice. The racing bosses were 100% behind me. They could not have been more supportive. They said to me, look, we can't believe how you're being treated here. If this was the sports department, this would not be happening. But the world of celeb, so to speak, is a different world. And by that afternoon, I've been sacked. And the up and end of all it is that there were presenters there who didn't want me there. And it appeared in the end that the biggest problem I faced was that one or two of those presenters were worried that I would turn it around. And they didn't want that because they didn't want any attention on the show other than themselves. So their worst nightmare was a situation where someone who had been awful managed to find solutions for making it good, because then it wouldn't be about them, which is kind of narcissistic. If we go back to my first person. James Knight and Calvin.
That's it for James Knight. You've made his day.
Knighty and I have an ongoing back. He writes miserable stuff, but once, quite recently, he wrote, why can't everyone be more cheerful? So now every time he writes anything, I just say, it's all amazing, James. Come on, cheer up. The problem with Knighty is he's not consistent. If you're going to be a misery, you can't be a misery one day and then all happy the next. Like, if you're going to go down the misery route, you've got to always be miserable.
Come on, James, stop being a miserable bastard. We've covered that. So are you at Chester this week, Matt?
I am. I'm really looking forward to it. It's always a good atmosphere. As far as I can see, this might sound irrelevant to anyone watching on telly, but Chester, so many years, it's absolutely lashed down. Like all horse racing, to be honest, any horse racing in the rain is pretty miserable. But Chester, the fact that the people come out in their thousands, it feels like a bit of a party atmosphere. Chester is about the weather, and although I don't think it's going to be sunny, it looks as though it's going to be up to 20 degrees, and I can't see any rain in the forecast at all for Chester this week. So I'm really looking forward to it. I love the Ormond. That race, I think, back in the day, used to have much better old timers. Now it always has some good horses in it and stuff, and you occasionally see a good Derby trial or good Oaks trial. So, yeah. And the other thing is, as a punter, you cut it down to stalls 1 to 5 in most races. So
you fit in well there, don't you, with all fake tanners? You actually look a normal colour there, don't you? They all come out in they're all the tan. In fact, one of the funniest things I saw, Matt, me and John Lang were pulling into York car park last year, and you were working for ITV.
oh, man.
We saw these like bright orange cars. I said, John, I says, fucking hell, that's orange, right? And then look who got out of it. You did.
It's so people can't really see me because I morph into the colour.
Yeah, that was good, man.
It was absolutely brilliant. I was howling with John. You wouldn't have known this. I went, this is unbelievable.
Next time you see it, you could come over and say hello, and you could say, fucking hell, he said. That's the only podcast we've ever done where we got no listeners at all.
Yeah.
Hey, Chester, I think it's a good meeting. Chester Cup's always a good puzzle. You know, genuinely, I think it's a nice place to go. That atmosphere, tight circle. I think there's a feel-good factor about Chester. It just feels like you're at quite a fun meeting. And I know there'll be people, oh, it can't be fun. It's all about punting. But if you go to work, what you want is a nice, fun meeting. I like the idea of you saying I'd fit in. I'm not sure anyone on ITV Racing would say I fit in with anyone, to be quite frank. But and also, I wear socks. Puts me out of the league.
Yeah, at least you wear socks. That is a plus point, unlike the blogger fanatics. Fawon has been on. Fawon's rung your On the Line show before, hasn't it?
That one goes back to when I started on TV, which was on Stateside, which was before evening racing, me and Compo. And we started about 8 in the evening and go on till 2 in the morning. And it was great in the old days because we'd have takeaway delivered to us at about 10 o'clock. We'd get on the phones and you'd have your food on the desk. And it was just a great night. And Pompo and I would go through a completely different way to where it's done now. Like we'd pick out topics like your best kids' sweets and all that kind of stuff. And you'd get to 2 a.m. and you'd have about 300 emails that you hadn't read out. It was like a little group of people. And now, of course, it's nonsense because you've got evening race go on till 9 with the floodlights and that community is all gone. But Fawon was part of that original community, that Stateside community.
Fawon, Kieran Fawon.
Yeah, Kieran Fallon, yeah. When Fallon was in the full day, go, Kieran, come on, Kieran Fallon.
Oh, Fawon. Brilliant. Right, one question to finish then, and it's, of course, Samuel the Cat's resident slot. A special deal has been offered if you get through the first round of Britain's Got Talent. You get £20,000 cash in hand if you get through. The only rules are that you have to be on stage and be involved with the act. What type of act would you do? And who else would you rope into the act to help you? So I'll start us off. It's easy, really. You're brain dead if you don't do this. So you either get a load of ripples or a load of kids and get the audience to feel sorry for them like they always do. Sing a little angelic tune. I'll be the composer or whatever. And the audience goes, you've got to put them through. 20 bags, Samuel the Cat. That's my solution. Anyone else?
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen Britain's Got Talent. Is it on commercial television? It's not BBC.
It's ITV and I'll host that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a plug there. You know, you'd be good at that.
Anybody else with anything that they do?
First of all, maybe recreate legendary porn scenes and rope in the Minogue sisters to assist.
I'm not sure that's worth 20 grand, though, to be honest. But
well, I'd be chosen that 20 grand anyway because I'd consider I'd already won. I could maybe do a ventriloquist act as well and sit Julie Harrington on me knee so I could work the controls easily. Get it, say something actually useful about racing and show some initiative other than adding to the litany of small what on the TV.
I can't hypnotise people, but I would go in there and say, okay, I am going to do some hypnosis here, and I'm going to put the whole of the audience to sleep within 1 minute, and I would bring 3 old blokes on from a podcast, and I would sit them down, and I'd start talking about affordability checks. And I reckon within 1 minute, they'd be all gone.
Old bloke. We're in the prime of our life. We're in our mid-20s, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Oh, bloke.
Yeah.
How insulting.
That's been fun and interesting to do with Matt Chapman. Following on from Rishi Pasadu, of course, has got his own Wikipedia page. We hope you enjoyed the show.
He's getting us tickets and all crafts next year.
Yeah, we do sincerely hope you enjoyed the show, and any feedback is more than welcome. Good
No,
and
it's
bad, we don't
not.
mind. James Knight, what do you think? That's all from us.
Thank
We're
God.
back on Friday with more shit tips. Bye for now.